Hi everyone, I'm Rod, the Aussie IT contractor. I quit my last permanent role 20 years ago and have been a contractor ever since, but that first contract brought with it many new challenges that frankly I was poorly prepared for. My only research that I conducted before making that first big move was holding a few casual conversations with some of the contractors that I'd worked with. Looking back, I was a little naive and perhaps should have been asking a whole lot more pointed questions. However, over those 2 decades, I have picked up a few snippets of useful information and knowledge of things that would have been really handy to know before becoming an IT contractor. In my previous video, I discussed the mechanics of being a contractor, including how the client, agency and contractor relationships work. So please check that one out if you would like to know more. This time, I'm addressing the big differences between permanent employment and contracting, including income expectations, employment security, and some of the additional costs involved in contracting. Just before we get started, some quick disclaimers. This video does not offer legal, financial, accounting or taxation advice. It's for general information purposes only and is based on my experience as a contractor. And as you might be able to tell from my accent, I am indeed an Australian and all of my contracting experience has been gathered from working here. There are certain sections that are very specific to Australia, so they may not apply to you if you're working somewhere outside of our fair country. So, a quick recap on what a contractor is. The client company will engage the services of a contractor to perform a role, and while the contractor is with that company and using the company's offices and their equipment, they aren't employed directly by the company. A recruitment agency will sit between the two. It enters into a contract with the client company and a provision of services contract with the contractor. The agency makes payroll for the contractor, but they're not the employer of that person, and the agency makes their income by charging the client a commission for the contractor's services. Number 1, the performance review. A permanent staff member can expect to receive a performance evaluation every 12 months, where they meet with their reporting manager to review their skills development, their achievements, and their overall work performance for the past year. Now, a good performance review is objective. It's tied to quantifiable, measurable results that use key performance indicators which are reflective of achievable goals and behaviours. It engages with the employee on the progress of their development plans and works to support the employee in meeting their career goals. And an employee who has shown good performance is also rewarded with a pay rise and an annual bonus. However, many studies have shown that performance reviews are not conducted well. Managers have an almost encyclopedic recall of every small transgression the employee has made and is focused on the areas of their failure rather than being a balanced recap of the entire year. So, rather than giving timely feedback to the employee, that manager can squirrel away an incident and save it up for the review time. Annual reviews are so poorly received that there are some progressive companies that have decided to do away with them completely and just have informal catch-ups between managers and staff members, and they tend to work a lot better. So the good news is, in general, contractors do not receive annual performance reviews or KPIs. That said, there is a downside to not having a formal review process in place, and that's something which I will address a little bit later in this video. Number 2. Well, this one's pretty clear and comes as a surprise to nobody: job security. Sure, permanent employees can lose their jobs, they can face redundancy when a company goes through a restructure or a merger, but in general, permanent roles are significantly more secure than a contract role. Permanent roles are notionally without an end date, while contracts are for a set period of time, typically 6 or 12 months. So there is an expectation that contractors won't have long-term job security within the same role. However, contracts do not have an ironclad guarantee that they'll run for their full term, and they can be terminated early at no fault of the contractor. Some of these reasons might be the project you're working on is over budget and the project needs to cut costs, or there's been a corporate restructure. Therefore, contractors will be shown the exit before any permanents are made redundant. Maybe another project is cancelled and there are permanent staff in there that need a seat. They might replace contractors. And a general economic downturn means that the company looks to trim their numbers. And yes, COVID-19, I'm looking at you, where companies just wholesale exited their contractors to look after the permanents and to look after their bottom line. But you say, a contractor has a contract, right? It can't just be broken. Surely they have to pay the contractor out for the remaining term? Well, no. All they need to do is give the notice period in accordance with the contract. So if you've got a 2-week notice period, they'll say your contract's going to end in 2 weeks, and unfortunately, that's it. As you may recall, I mentioned earlier that there was a downside to not having some sort of review process in place for contractors, no annual review that permanent staff would often get. Now, the downside is that there are managers out there who don't give contractors any feedback and will therefore just let contractors go without explanation. You're not meeting targets, you're not meeting expectations. They'll just go, they're a contractor. We'll replace them with someone else. It's unfortunate, but it does happen, and because there's no formal process in place, there's not a lot that the contractor can do about that. So every contractor that I have worked with and know personally understands that there is no such thing as job security while being a contractor. Number 3, here it is. Let's discuss the elephant in the room. What's the income difference between a permanent role and a comparable contract one? And this is probably the most significant reason for wanting to become a contractor. As you are undoubtedly aware, and if you've ever seen a permanent salaried role being advertised, permanent role remuneration is defined as an annual base salary amount. Contract roles, however, are paid on a daily rate basis. So, permanent roles will offer X thousand dollars per annum, and a contract will be offered at X dollars per day. Now, after averaging out the daily rate over a year, which we'll cover in a minute, a contractor will make, drum roll, between 60 to 80% more than the comparable permanent role's base salary for the same year. And that, my friends, is not too shabby. Number 4. So you now know the pay, and you're thinking, hey, that's all I want to know, time to go off and watch a funny cat video. Not so fast. There are many differences between contracting and permie roles when it comes to benefits that are only offered to permies. So while a contractor's paycheck is significantly larger than a permanent counterpart's, there is no such thing as a free lunch. To start with, contractors do not receive paid leave. Now, setting aside fixed-term contracts with a whole different topic that would take another video to explain, contractors don't get paid leave. And the term daily rate is exactly what it says on the tin. Contractors are only paid for the days that they attend and perform work. Permanent salaried employees can receive many different types of paid leave, including annual leave, public holidays, sick leave, family care leave, bereavement leave, and depending on your employer, also potentially maternity or paternity leave. And if you're an Australian, depending on the state you live in, you will receive various amounts of long service leave depending on the length of your employment with the same employer. Adding all those up, for a long-term employee, that can average out to 50 paid days off a year, or the equivalent of 10 weeks. So a 52-week year, the permanent employee only works 42 of those weeks. While I've waxed lyrical about the glacial rate of promotions in my permie work, which was a contributing factor to me giving up permie and becoming a contractor, in principle, and for many people, I must say, permanent roles can lead to a defined career progression. There are many clear paths for promotions, for secondments to other roles within the organisation to gain experience. There are mentoring and staff development programs which exist to help staff improve their skills and knowledge and make them more marketable for their organisation. However, for contractors, none of this formally exists. There are still ways that contractors can advance their careers, and I've certainly done so in the past 20 years, but those pathways are much less well defined and more reliant on the contractors forging their own path rather than relying on the company to lay out a career path for them. There are a range of other benefits that are only made available to permanent employees and not to the contractors that are working beside them. So things like employee discounts. As an example, in the banking and insurance industries, employees can receive reduced rates on home loans and personal loans, and different treatment on lenders' mortgage insurance, and discounts on insurance premiums, and waive fees on their bank accounts. Depending on where you sit in the corporate hierarchy, performance bonuses can be paid to permanent staff, and based on the company results and meeting other KPIs. As a contractor, bonuses are exceedingly rare. The Australian Taxation Office also generously allows companies to award $1,000 in shares to employees each year without being charged fringe benefits tax. So many companies will offer that to their permanent employees. And many companies that I've contracted for either have excluded contractors from the employee Christmas party or just charged them a door fee to attend. If you're one for awards and recognition, CEO awards are generally only open to permanent employees. And during the COVID-19 inspired need to work from home recently, I had a company offer to provide permanent staff with computer monitors, office chairs and other equipment to furnish their home offices, but again for permanent staff only. Contractors had to outfit themselves. And finally, if you're senior enough within the company, you may be fortunate enough to get a corporate credit card to use within the company's expense policy. Now, that's a much more controlled process for contractors to get approval for expenses. It's possible, but again, you have to apply for refunds and reimbursements rather than just having an ongoing credit card that you could use. In the same vein as career development, companies will often provide their permanent employees with ongoing training and skills development via internally run short courses and accreditation. They also generally offer some sort of assistance with further education, providing paid time off or covering fees or costs or offering payments for completing qualifications. And as an example, while I was still in permanent employment, my employer offered 4 paid hours off per week to attend university courses related to my job. Now that is something I definitely took advantage of. Training and certifications are equally important to contractors, but these are really the contractor's responsibility, and time the contractor takes off of work to complete study will not be paid for by the employer. Plus, the contractor also needs to cover all of the costs and fees for the training and learning activities themselves, as the employer is unlikely to reimburse any of those sort of activities. Number 5, personal finances and budgeting. Contractors' pay can be quite variable and requires tight control on their finances to balance a budget. So you start your new contract, let's say February, and there are no public holidays, and you work the full 28 days of the month, and that income hitting your bank account is 28 times your daily rate, and it looks fantastic, but that can be a trap. Remember earlier where we looked at the number of days a contractor doesn't work? Well, allowing for a few weeks leave a year, every company I've contracted with has a mandatory 2 to 3 week shutdown over Christmas, plus public holidays and some other days you need to take off here and there, some sick leave. The contractor only works for around 46 weeks a year. So that 46 weeks of pay has to cover you for the full 52, as compared to a permanent employee where their pay is averaged out over the whole year. So based on that, you need to save 12% of your income that you earn on a full month to cover those other times. Looking at Easter and Anzac Day, you can lose 3 days pay out of a month and you haven't even really taken leave. While you always hope to start a new contract at the end of the old one, that's not always reality, and savings are important to get you through those times between contracts. As an example, over the 20 years I've been contracting, the total time I've been between contracts is about 12 months. So again, I have to budget for 5% to cover the downtime when I'm not earning. There we have it, the things that I wish I had known about IT contracting before I'd started. So, when comparing permanent to contracting and the swings and roundabouts that are involved on both of them, how does it stack up? Well, contracting demands much more self-sufficiency and requires understanding and management of risks, much more than a permanent role would require of someone. But having worked in both a permanent job for over a decade and then twice that as a contractor, for me the advantages of contracting are really clear. Yes, there's far less job security and there's much more you have to manage, but there's much more opportunity. I've often returned to companies on contracts that I've worked for previously and brought with me the skills and experience I gained from other organisations and other roles. Contractor industry experience is highly valued, and new viewpoints from seeing how problems can be solved or projects delivered from other perspectives can help contractors build their own profile and brand and become sought after in their field. So that's it, folks. Please like, subscribe and leave your comments below, as that really helps me, and thank you for watching.